zone.
Greetings, my fellow Fright Fiends. It's your buddy Boogeyman Ben here for a new episode of Boogeyman Ben's Horror Zone. And this segment is a newer segment to this channel, and this is called Second Chance Horror. What I'm going to be focusing on with the Second Chance Horror segment is I'm going to be talking about horror films that I didn't like. Ones that I didn't like upon initial viewing. The first one I want to focus on in this segment is pretty relevant because I just talked about it and purchased it for a segment that I did a little while ago. And this was a film that if you go back and watch old videos of mine going back to 2011, I talked many times about how much I hate this film. The movie in question that I will be discussing today is Gus Van Sant's remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And after I saw it in '98, just to give a little history, back then, before the internet was what it is now, there was a lot of rumors about Psycho. And there were some pretty interesting ones. One of them being that after the shower scene, the movie was going to go a completely different route. But of course, the trailer and some of the previews gave away that when you see similar shots in the film with different actors, you know that the movie is pretty going to much go the same route. But, I thought I'd just give the film another chance. To talk a little bit about what I do like about the remake of Psycho, in no way do I think it's a great film, but there are things about it I do like. Number one, I do have to say that I do like Anne Heche in the film. I like the way Anne Heche portrayed Marion because there's little hints of differences in the character, especially like when she's being sort of flirted with by Tom Cassidy. Almost like the way that she looks at Cassidy and the way that her body language is that she's just like, oh god, what a creep. You could just see that more. I felt like I could see that more in this representation of Marion than I could with the way that Janet Leigh played her. Also in the scene in the parlor, because Vince Vaughn's Norman Bates is so much more over the top and so much more creepy, you can just see how hesitant Marion is when it comes to eating the food that Norman has prepared for. And again, it's a woman's 90s sensibility. So it's the sensibility of a woman in the 90s as opposed to a woman in the 60s. It's like where she doesn't trust this guy. She thinks there's something off about him and she really doesn't want to be alone with him. And that's something that I just got right off the bat from that scene. I do like the way that the motel looks. I don't like the new sign at all, but I do like the motel where it says motel on the roof of the structure. I really like that. I don't know why. It sort of gives it kind of a 70s vibe to me. I really like the colors for the motel. Another positive for me is I really like the scene when Marion first pulls up to the motel. And of course she gets out. There's no one in the office. She goes to the edge of the motel and she looks up at the house and you can see Mrs. Bates or Norman dressed as Mrs. Bates walking in front of the window. The thing I like about that scene, and it's something very subtle, but it's that you can hear music playing. Like that Norman is listening to, that the mother is listening to music in her room and you can hear the music. I don't know why I like that. I don't know how you would hear that over the rain, but again, that's getting, a little bit too technical, but I really like hearing the music as the mother walks in front of the window. That was another touch that I really cared for. The other thing I really like is I thought Viggo Mortensen did a pretty good job as Sam Loomis. I really liked it. I really liked the way he played Sam Loomis. I like John Gavin in the original, but I really liked that he made Sam Loomis in his own. I know he was more of, a cowboy, had the cowboy hat and the boots and everything, but I really like what he brought to the character. He brought his own take on the character instead of just and it worked. He brought his own take to the character and it really worked for me. I just like his little sly sense of humor. I think he's one of the strongest next to William H. Macy in the film. The shower scene is okay. I think it's well done. It was done a little bit differently. Of course, they made Mrs. Bates look a little bit differently with the long blonde hair instead of the pulled back kind of school mom, bun. I also didn't. I thought it was kind of cool, the abstract images. Initially, I didn't really care for them, but when, Marion dies, you see the storm outside. you see like storm clouds as it's sort of flashing back and forth, and then when Arbogast is killed, you see like a flash of a naked woman. You see a flash of like an animal in the middle of a highway. I thought that was, you know, it was different. I mean, it wasn't great, but again, these are subtle changes that kind of put a mark on it that you can say, yeah, this is Gus Van Sant just doing something that, you know, as a filmmaker, he would have done something like this. So that was kind of cool because again, it was abstract, it was different. So that didn't bother me. I know a lot of people don't like those little images that they have in there. I also thought there was some scenes at the end, like with the mother in the basement. I actually really liked the way the mother looked at the end. I still think the original is the scariest, and I love that look. But I thought it looked very well done. Also, I loved the birds that were inside it was like a glass case or something like that was in the fruit cellar with the mother. I like that. My biggest issue with the film, and I know it was remake shot for shot, but there are some things in it that I just think are unnecessary. One of them being Norman masturbating while watching Marion change. It just sort of cheapens the character of Norman Bates, of what their character represented. And the whole thing about Psycho is that if you're going into this film having never seen Hitchcock's original, having never seen or known how that film was going to end, um, you don't care for Norman Bates. You think he's a creep. The other thing I have a problem with this film, and something I've never really addressed, is that the dialogue. The dialogue still has that 60s, 1950s, 1960s, you know, terms that people don't use today, or didn't use that people didn't use in the 90s, and it just stands out. And then there's things that they replace the dialogue with, like where he says, if it doesn't gel, it isn't, instead of saying if it doesn't gel, it isn't aspic, he says if it doesn't gel, it isn't jello. That one doesn't bother me, but the one where Lila says, instead of in the original where she said, let me go get my coat, she says, let me go get my Walkman. It was just so stupid. Like, who would, it just, I just thought it was so silly. And the fact that Lila constantly has her headphones on, or has the headphone, like the Walkman on in certain scenes, I just thought it was kind of silly. It just stood out, and it just didn't seem natural for some reason. It just didn't seem natural the way she did it. Also, the way that Julianne Moore played Lila, she yells all the time. She's constantly shouting her lines out. And I know that there was rumors that Gus Van Sant timed the actors so that they were saying the dialogue exactly at the same rate that the original actors were saying the dialogue in Psycho. But for some reason, as much as I love Julianne Moore, who's one of my favorite actresses, her line reads come off very, very almost like machine gun rapid fire. It doesn't seem like natural dialogue to me. I don't like the new house at all. It doesn't fit at all, and I think that was another big mistake of redoing the house and not having the Psycho house. I mean, I was so happy that the Bates Motel television series realized that the house is as much of a character as Norman, and that they kept it the same look and feel. That house is iconic, and it's a character in the film. And to have something else, you know, I just never warmed up to the original look of the house. I just never warmed up to the new house. And nothing against Vince Vaughn. I think Vince Vaughn has become a fantastic actor, but in this film, he was relatively new to the acting business. He had only done a handful of films when this came out, one of them being Swingers. And I just don't like him as Norman Bates. And no matter how many times I watch this film, I just don't like the character that the version of Norman Bates that he portrays. He portrays him almost as he's just a creepy man. And I just there's nothing about him that you empathize with, and that was the whole hook for the original Psycho, is that once Marion is killed, you're supposed to switch your empathy to Norman, and you do with the way that Anthony Perkins portrays him, because the way that Anthony Perkins portrayed him is that he's trying to cover up what his mother has done. And you're almost so you the whole trick of the film is that you're empathizing with a murderer at the end of the film, and you can't do that because Vince Vaughn is a creep as soon as you see him, and I don't like the way he plays the character. I don't like the way some of the way that he recites some of the lines, the way that the candy corn was something that Perkins brought to the role, and the way that Vince Vaughn uses that prop, if you want to call it, it's just like it's just obnoxious the way he eats the candy corn in the film, and he's always doing it, and that's not something that Perkins did. It was very kind of subtly that he was doing it, and I just like I said, everything that Perkins did to perfection, I feel like Vince Vaughn just overdoes, and it just makes it a very unlikable character. Vince Vaughn dressed up as the mother at the end is still laughable. It just doesn't. It's not scary. The film is just not scary. But again, I'm seeing this film after seeing the original so many times, but I still think the original Psycho is still very scary. But I think it all comes down to the way that it was conceived, the way that it was filmed, the acting that was brought to the table. Um, I understand why they wanted to do an experiment like this, why Gus Van Sant wanted to do this. Just to show, like, like if you're going to remake something, remake it shot for shot. I mean, that's what he says in the documentaries, is just remake it shot for shot. But it's just, for me, it was unnecessary. I still feel like it's unnecessary. It's still not a film that I love. Um, but I don't know if I hate it as much as I used to. And I think it's just because I appreciate what they were trying to do. It was done as an art piece. It was done as something that, you're an experiment to see if they could actually pull it off, to do something to remake a classic film that everybody loved, and see if they could do it in color because, they say in one of the documentaries, kids didn't watch black and white films. A lot of people didn't see Psycho. So bringing it to a new generation in color, maybe it opened people's eyes to the original. I can't bash this film like I used to. I just, sometimes you just sort of have to accept things the way they are and just, give it another watch. So I don't regret owning this film. I don't regret watching this film. Um, I do think it still has a lot of issues. The dialogue, Vince Vaughn, no disrespect to him because I do like Vince Vaughn, but I don't like him as Norman Bates. If I had to give this movie a rating on my scale, I would give it 2 skulls. I'm curious if anybody else has seen Gus Van Sant's Psycho. Please, if you have any thoughts on it, if you like it, if you hate it, please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. And also, let me know what you think about this segment, Second Chance Horror, talking about horror films that I didn't like upon initial viewing, and these could be films that people loved, that people hated, that people were split on, that people think that didn't need to be made, like I felt like with Psycho the first time I saw it, and felt like it still to this day doesn't need to be remade, but accepting it for what it is, and it's art, giving it a fair critique. That's what I'm trying to do with this segment. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch this. Again, please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. And please join me on Facebook, Boogeyman Ben's Horror Zone. I have my own Facebook page. Link down below. You guys can check it out. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter. Don't use Twitter very much, but the videos will be on Twitter if you prefer watching them there as opposed to YouTube. And I appreciate all the support. And I hope everyone's doing well. Take it easy. Stay scared. Peace.